All right. Hello, everyone. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining. Well, what we know is that if you don't know about something, how on earth are you going to be able to protect it, especially when it comes to managing your client's infrastructure? Security has always been one of the biggest challenges and also one of the biggest opportunities for MSPs. And it's becoming even more uh, prominent in this work remote situation that we're seeing. In today's webinar, we're going to be discussing the different security practices that you can use to secure your client's environment, and of course, leverage documentation and other tools to give you more visibility into that client's environments. Today, we are very excited here at IT to be teaming up with Liongard to deliver this presentation. My name's Travis from IT I'm one of the sales engineers here. And IT we've transformed the way managed service providers think about efficiency and IT documentation with our industry-leading documentation platform. Prior to me coming on board with IT I worked at an MSP here in Western Canada as a support technician and later on as a project manager for our infrastructure projects, including our onboarding process as well, including all the new security solutions that we were developing out. I'm really excited to introduce to you our friends here at Liongard. First, we have Bill here as well. Hey, Bill, how's it going today?
Hey, how's it going? Hi, everybody.
Awesome. We're also joined in the background by Jonathan on the Liongard team as well. He's going to be hanging out in the chat and helping out there as well. And then we also have Jana from my side as well. She's going to be in the chat as well. So drop us a line in the chat and say hello and where you're joining us from. I'm here in Vancouver, Canada, along with Jana. Where are you today, Bill?
I'm down here in lovely sunny Tampa, Florida, and luckily all the storms have gone past, and it's actually pretty pleasant out now, finally.
It definitely looks a lot better there than it does for me right now. We're having quite some storms on our side here, so hopefully my power doesn't go out while we're delivering this.
No.
Oh, we've got someone from San Diego joining us. Oh, I'd love to be in San Diego right now. All right. So what we're going to be doing is today we have a few topics we're going to discuss. First, we want to discuss why having knowledge of your client's environments is key to delivering really great and secure services. We're also going to share some best practices with you on how you're going to secure your client's infrastructure. And then we're also going to talk about how tools like Liongard and IT Glue come together to strengthen your security and secure your client's networks. Just a few housekeeping items. We are using the Zoom platform, so you will see that there are two options down in your bottom tray. You have a Q&A box, so if you have any questions, please drop them in there. That way everyone can see them. We can either answer them in the right as a text back, or Bill and I will address it right at the end of the presentation. And then if you, the chat option is also where we're going to be pasting some links and some other resources for our use. So if you have both of those open, you can stay involved with the conversation and then of course, ask any questions that you have as well. All right, now security, that's what we're here to talk about. And this is kind of the whole crux of the matter here is in order for you to be able to secure something, you need to know what it is that the customer has. If your customer in April went down to Best Buy and Costco and bought a whole bunch of laptops because they just wanted to take matters into their own hands, well, now if you don't know about those or know that they're have the latest patches up to date, how are you going to be able to secure it? So moving along here, this is really what we're saying here is that it's seldom that attacks are you're going to see them coming. They're going to come, in the front door, right? These are going to be things that are coming in on devices that you either didn't know about or didn't accurately secure. So what you need to have is that visibility into your customers' networks to be able to see everything that they've brought on and put it on as a trusted device that you need to also be aware of. This is true even if you're not necessarily marketing yourself as a security provider. Some people like to say that they are now an MSSP or managed services and security provider. Regardless of whether you tout that in your branding, your customers are counting on you for security because you are responsible for everything on their infrastructure. they necessarily don't understand all the ins and outs of cybersecurity, so they assume that it's up to you to keep track of that. Your stack and how you manage what you've been told to manage is up to you, but you also need to be aware of the hardware and software that your customers are using as well that might introduce attacks into those managed systems and increase the attack surface. Now, I'm sure we all have an example of this. So I actually want to share, if you guys can in the chat, I want to see if anyone has any crazy stories about where they have found the craziest piece of infrastructure at a client site. So, you know, whether it be that you find computers tucked behind walls or behind gyprock or drywall, as we call it here in Canada. I'm not sure where everyone calls it, but I'll tell you my story. So I was doing an onboarding for a new medical office. And so obviously very sensitive information. And I couldn't figure out where this SSID was coming from. So I went all around to all the doctors' rooms and I found a wireless access point that didn't have a brand on it. It was likely ordered from Wish or Alibaba, and it was behind a filing cabinet with its own PoE injector coming off of a 5-port switch that that I thought was going direct to the wall for the computer. So that was my craziest place that I found it. I see that
Awkward.
Simon, yeah, Simon is saying here that he found a server near the ladies' toilet. Bill, have you heard any crazy stories about where people have found stuff?
No, see, I come a lot of my background. I've been in IT almost 20 years now, so it was in actual IT at large corporations. So I'm actually the guilty party. I've had servers stuffed under my desk, sort of hidden away, and I've brought my own little switch in and sort of set that up like unknowns to IT. So I'm actually one of the guys you got to look out for, because I'm always like trying to get it done, and I'm like, I need resources. So like, hey, I'll just borrow that desktop over there, and I'll borrow that monitor over there, and then I'll stick it under my desk and nobody will see it, or I'll hide it in like some little area where nobody knows, like it looks like a broom closet or something. I'm the guy. My bad.
That's okay. Well, we're here to help you with some of the tools that we have for you. I see that there's a couple people in the chat saying that they're finding a lot of switches in drop ceilings or in the, there's another word for it that goes between the tiles and the actual ceiling, the false ceiling. Someone is saying that their maintenance computer is still in the locker room of a gym. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy places that you may not think to find these assets. And so there's a lot of different tools that you have. So you can use your phone and identify the strongest signal for things like wireless access points. But then you also need to have ability to, once you find that, share it with the rest of your team. So I knew where those access points were and kind of how the layout of the office was, but I was the person that was on site going to that medical office. And so I need to make that information available to the rest of my team who's back at home base, who's trying to remotely support those. So we know that sharing is caring, and it applies to this situation as well, that if I discover that information, I need to make it available across all of my team members, regardless if that's my project team, but especially my service desk team. So IT Glue has actually been working to help solve this problem. So when I worked at this was a couple years ago, we were using IT Glue to help get this information out there. So we were in a time crunch, and so I was on site entering information into IT Glue and getting that pushback so that my team back at head office could see that information. They could work on some of the tasks that I needed them to do remotely. So having this centralized and standardized system for documentation allows us to have that mechanism to share this knowledge with everyone across the team. Now, without this type of system, as a lot of you know, we would have technicians doing their own things. So people would just say, oh, this is how this is plugged in, or not really care too much about what is actually going on, just what they think that the last time they saw it, if they were ever there. So having this documented in a central system is very valuable, as a lot of you have discovered, but it also opens up the door for the next evolution of what documentation and efficiency looks like, and that is with automation. So the foundation of automating things is to have things the same way. And this is where our friends at Liongard come into you for those all of you who currently use IT Glue and who are not using an automation platform. So Bill, I want you to tell us a little bit more about why automation is important in documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I've been in IT for 20 something years now, and I've seen the evolution of where things have come in all areas of IT, right? And one of the things that I think watching folks do is the time it takes us to potentially gather up all of this information that we've just been talking about, get that information into a centralized data source, and then being able to manage that information going forward. So for anybody that's looked at a report that they ran last month or even last week, you realize that unfortunately data ends up having a very, very short shelf life. And so, one of the things that we came up with way back in the day, right, was Cmdb, probably people are familiar with. Cmdb sort of revolved around desktops and servers, endpoints, essentially. And one of the challenges with it was keeping all of that information up to date. How do you do it? How do I know when that server disappeared, or if somebody has that POE behind the filing cabinet, or somebody boarded up something or put it underneath their desk, and is it still there, and what does it look like, and how is it set up? And there's so much information that we want to know about it, and that's where automation can come in. It can help us to solve that sort of short shelf life issue with data, right? That report you ran last week is probably already out of date. And the way that we kind of get around that is we're going to automate collecting information on these physical systems, and not only that, but also cloud services and applications and all these other critical components of our modern IT infrastructure that we need the customers to have running so they can run their business. So that's where we want to make sure that we're capturing that information. We are auditing that information every single day and bringing that into a historic timeline. So you actually have very much like revisions in IT Glue for those that are using it. You've got this ability to actually rewind time and actually back up. So you could see maybe it doesn't work today, but I know it worked on Friday, and having that actual ability to roll that back. So that's where it kind of, when it comes into security and things like that, you really have to understand what not just, I know that's a server over there, but I need to know what that server does. I need to know how it's set up. I need to know how these applications are set up and working. And did somebody make changes to these things? And if they did, do those changes potentially impact our security posture and the way that we operate and the things that we do, and potentially opening up holes that we really don't want to have open? And all of that comes down to visibility. Trying to do that manually is, with today's complex IT systems, is starting to get unmanageable. It really is. So jump to the next slide there.
Yeah, and then this is really about how security is really it's just kind of one of the major things that is becoming quite prevalent, especially over this year.
Yeah, so let's start with a couple of different security protocols. How many? I mean, I think we have a poll for this as well. Or at least throw it in the chat, and just kind of how many folks are trying to follow either CIS or Nist CSF in their business today. So we kind of give everybody a minute to sort of fill this out.
Yeah, I love kind of just hearing about all the changes that have coming, especially with the different states enacting, especially in the U.S., about the different privacy laws. And then it really just comes down to using one of these as your framework, because they're all are really just different variations of Nist or CIS.
Yeah, I mean, you've got depending on financial and regulatory and healthcare, you've got HIPAA and SOX and PCI and a whole bunch of other specific things that target sort of these key areas. But if you were to sort of go, okay, well, what's above HIPAA, what's above PCI, what's above SOX and things like that, because those are specific around controls around that particular industry or data it's trying to protect or whatever the case is. But there's this overarching framework that sits above all of that. And that's where Nist and CIS kind of come in, is like, if we're not doing, and I talk about this a lot, is, you guys can have, um, the best of everything, right? I could have the best firewall out there and the best AV tool and the best anti-malware. But at the end of the day, if you have really poor, say, you know, um, management around passwords and user accounts and permissions and access, it doesn't matter how good those things are. If they gain account access or admin access to your environment, game over. They can pretty much do whatever they want, right? And then your AV
Totally.
isn't going to save you there. So that's the
Right.
kind of things where you want to look at building out some of these other protocols and really kind of following along.
Yeah. It looks like a lot of people are either using them strictly. So 13% of you are saying that you're using uh, following these very strictly, but 57% of you are saying that you are at least partially following it. So you know that it exists. And then there's another 30% of you who are not using these two protocols. And that might be because of the industry that you're in. You might be using, like you said, one of those more specific ones as well. So, all right. So with that said, Bill, I know that you have a little bit of knowledge and wanted to share about both Nist and CIS. So why don't you take us through Nist right now?
Yeah, so basically there's sort of the five core aspects of the NIST CSF, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So identity is trying to figure out what you have. And that's where we need, as kind of Travis alluded to earlier in the presentation, was I needed to let my folks back home. I'm on premises, I can see what's going on here, but I need to let everybody else know like where this stuff lives. And I got a picture of it sitting behind the counter and wherever the case it might be. But, two of the fundamental aspects of this are asset management and risk assessment. And under, sort of the first part of this. So that's where you want to make sure that we really know what it is that we have. And then the other part of that, which obviously we can see with our eyes a lot of times, hopefully if we can find everything, we can see with our eyes what we have. But the other part of that is then it gets into things like risk assessment. This is areas where Liongard can really help out, because we're going to get under the covers and be able to evaluate that system environment and figure out, is there a potential risk? Is there a problem with the setup and configuration? Getting the deeper details about what's going on in that environment. Protection is going to be, some of those areas of like access control. Again, you could have the greatest firewall in the world, but if I have admin credentials to do whatever I want, it doesn't matter how good your firewall is. So, and that's how ransomware and things like that get started. So we want to be able to kind of like IT Glue can give us that place where we have the pictures of the stuff and the checklist that we have to look for. And then we bring Liongard in and it can give us the data and the information so that we can easily figure out, is there a problem we need to be aware of? Who has access to these devices? Are there any anomalies or issues or anything like that, by being able to continuously monitor what's changing in the environment? I think change management's another area we could probably spend a whole hour on, right? All of us trying to do a better job of tracking changes in what we do. But that's where we can automate that part of it. I think we're still in this place where, the way that I kind of always bring this up is like, if you guys remember 10 or 15 years ago, when RMMs were not the thing that everybody had, right? All we had was things like VNC, right? And remote control tools. And somebody came up and said, hey, you need to put Adobe on all 50 of these computers. And we just sort of went, oh, well, there goes the next 15 hours of my life. Nowadays, you wouldn't dream of doing things that inefficiently, right? None of us on this call probably would be like, nope, I would not do that. I would give that to my RMM. It would be done in 15 minutes. Yet we are still sitting down and copying and pasting and looking through and combing through systems to try to figure out, is there anything wrong? Did I miss something? What am I looking for? Did I catch everything? And now I've got to get everything that I'm looking at on the screen, and I need to get all this stuff into our documentation platform like IT Glue. That's where the automation is really going to help. And it's going to bolster these areas to make sure that you are doing that every single day, not just the first time the customer was brought on board and we go look at that information and it's 6 months old. Every single day, tracking changes, make sure we're secure and monitoring, make sure that we are communicating to different people. And you'll see the kind of touching in different areas, right? Communications, mitigation, looking at what do we need to do? And then ultimately, I've got a copy of what this thing looked like. If it should go, Tango uniform, what is it that, how do I put it back? How do I make it? How do I fix it? And so those are some of the things that Liongard and IT Glue both, right? You need a repository, that central place to put this information. And then you need a solution that can help to automate the data that goes inside of it, and then be able to constantly monitor it, detect the changes, and make sure we're mitigating any of those potential risks, especially as people change things. Nothing worse than an engineer opening up 3389 and forwarding it to the file server because he has to access it from home later. Obviously, that would be really bad. So that's kind of the idea behind the Nist, is that that level above SOX and HIPAA and the other compliance and regulatory items, and Britain has even, the UK has even more, right? You got the ISO and BSO standards and stuff like that. So these are the things that, like, even if you're not trying to follow this strictly, and we saw like 57% of the folks that were doing that, it's really good to understand this and be able to take away something from each of these things and go, you know what, I should probably be able to do that a little bit better. And then there's another one after this. So let's talk a little bit about CIS. So CIS is a bit more about the control of those environments, right? So you've got things like, you'll see some foundational things that are the same. And this is going to be a common theme throughout the rest of this presentation, is building out your foundational strategy, regardless of if you're trying to follow these protocols or if you're loosely following them, or you're just like, hey, what's a good best practice for things like inventory and asset control? What's a good practice for account management and managing access to systems and being able to document control of those systems? That's where CIS really comes in, as it starts talking about things like, you know, who has admin privileges. You see it starts to get a lot more specific, whereas sort of NIST is kind of up here and CIS is getting really to the meat and potatoes. And then you've got sort of some of the other compliance and regulatory things that you have to deal with underneath that. So like, do we know what we have and who has access to it? I always love sharing stories. So like, we talked to a guy a couple of months ago, and one of his customers was hit by ransomware. So ultimately they had to pay for the keys, get the encryption keys, pay a data recovery company, get all that stuff, you know, restored and back right again. And one of the sad things that they found out was that somebody had gotten in and created an admin account on a local server and installed the application. And then the really bummer deal of the whole thing was it sat there for 200 days before it was activated, and they just flat missed it. So that's one of the things where, like, what are you just missing? And it might be that, you know, we might be lucky up till now, but nobody wants an auditor and an attorney to show up at the door and go, we need to see this because one of your customers was breached. And so that's where digging down into some of these controls, right? Do we have the right defenses in place? It's about knowing what tools you've got in there, not just the fact that I know what it is, but are we protecting all of that? And how are our systems currently configured to protect this? Do we have MFA turned on, or do we have our domain secure? Do we have good password systems in there? Are we monitoring for brute force attempts and suspicious logins and things like that? These are the kind of things that, you know, above the documentation layer that Liongard actually helps with. It's looking at, especially in CIS controls, a lot of our monitoring, for example, is really focused and honed in on, like, looking at this foundational layer of security and going, hey, is there a problem here? Can somebody kind of poke a hole in this area right there and get in? And it just analyzes the data to say, you know what, you should probably fix these 4 or 5 things, and then, you know, you're probably going to be in a lot better shape.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can attack this. Like you said, there's different protocols for different areas. Simon asks if NIST and CIS are mostly in the US, and I think you did kind of mention this, that ISO 27001 is a more global standard and more widely adopted in Europe. Is that right?
It is correct. Yeah, there's I think there's a British standards as well, one as well. But yeah, NIST was was signed into by an executive order in 2013 by President Obama, and it came out about a year later. So it's one of the things that kind of gets used a lot as a guidance. But if you, and then of course you got BSO or ISO 27001, and then there's a BSO standard. I can't remember the number for it, but that you can use as well. But if you look at if you were to take all of those standards from all those places and sort of overlay, this isn't, nobody reinvented the wheel on this one. So you can still look at the foundational kind of stuff that we're talking about. It applies to, like, it doesn't matter whether it's BSO, ISO, or NIST, right? Understanding continuous vulnerability management and assessing admin privilege and access to environments is just a best practice, period. So you
Right.
can take, you don't necessarily have to go, well, I don't, follow this or that or the other, but you can kind of look at the basics and underlying pieces of these security frameworks and go, man, I really could do that better. And that's, I think, our message today is that there's a lot of ways to attack this. But when you look at it and you go, yeah, I don't really have a good handle on admin privileges. If a new user account showed up on a SQL server tomorrow, how long before you knew it was there? And that's
Right.
the kind of stuff that's really scary, right?
Yeah. And this kind of takes us to this next point here, whereas a lot of these standards require documentation, because if you do get audited or attorney shows up at your doorstep, you have to say, what were you doing? What documentation do you have to support that you were doing best practices, or are they going to try and litigate against you for malpractice or not following best standards? And I think that's like you mentioned, this is where Liongard and IT Glue come in to try and help. That is that documentation is a really key part to delivering these types of secure services. So whether or not you are becoming compliant yourself, maybe you are being audited by an auditor for SOC 2 or PCI or HIPAA or GDPR, wherever you geographically are, you're going to need some foundation to store that information in. So IT Glue provides a great place to start on that. And then with Liongard, you can add in, the change tracking that is going to come when new user accounts are created, or discovering when new assets come on the network, and getting that all into a place so that, one, you can identify it so that you can protect it, but also have it documented should you need to produce any evidence of that in case something does happen. Having this is also going to really drive and help you shift towards a security first culture. Bill, you told the story about a technician wanting to add on RDP credentials to a server so they can work on it at home because they didn't want to work from the office, or that's not a very good security culture that's built into that story there. So
No, not at all.
And so getting that into the mindset of your employees is also going to come in with, what tools do you use? Do you require that they use MFA all the time for all the different applications that come in there? And so one of the ways that we at IT Glue try and help that is to ensure that this sensitive information and the tools that your team is signing into every day is something that is secure, and they have controls around it. So they're using multi-factor authentication every time they sign into IT Glue. They don't get a free pass when they're at the office or on the VPN, and they have to do it every time and get used to that. Security is everyone's responsibility. And you can't just have an admin account and everything, because it makes your life easier. But then we also at IT Glue want to ensure that none of that sensitive information around documentation or the keys to the castle are stored in a way that is vulnerable. So we have our own compliance here at IT Glue that we follow, which is SOC 2 Type 2, which means that here at IT Glue, we get our systems and our processes audited every year, and they control, what I'm allowed to tell you today, how I present this webinar, how I signed into my computer this morning, all the way up to how we develop new code in our application and develop new features, what our features are allowed and not allowed to do. There are some, features that people have been asking for in IT Glue that we can't provide under SOC 2 because they are not compliant with that high security standard. And we can't just give everyone keys to the castle because that makes it more efficient and easy. It is about security as well.
And Liongard's following those practices as well. So SOC 2, Type 2, MFA requirements, and adding, pen testing and things like that to make sure that, the data is safe and secure, and that we're doing our best to ensure that we've got every layer of security we can, and that it's set up right.
Totally, because you guys have a lot of access into those systems as well. And then one of the nice things here is that when you use Liongard is that you not only are automating that collection, but you're monitoring it for those changes and alerts. I think you kind of talked on this earlier, Bill, too, but I want to give you the opportunity to expand on it.
Yeah, definitely. So again, a couple of key things that we want to be able to first make it easy to get information. That's one of the most important things. If this takes too long, you know how busy we all are, we're not going to do it. And so, try to make it as simple as credentials into forms and go. And then we can start automating, collecting data, start feeding that data, which we'll show you here in a little bit, into IT Glue to make sure that when engineers and technicians and finance folks and everybody like that, when they need access to data, they have this place that they can go to. And we're sort of helping to feed this huge lion's share of information, pun intended, this huge lion's share of information into that system. And then the other thing too is like there's not a lot of written standards out there for how should you document something. Can anybody think of or recall of a standard where they're like, oh yeah, this is how you document a SQL database? Probably not. And so IT Glue did a great job of that, building these templates out and places to put this information. And then what we did is we just expanded on that and said, okay, now we'll automate the data collection part of that, and we'll bring this data in. And that way you're getting the same information from every single system every time in the same way. So you don't have to necessarily teach engineers how to document some of these more complex IT systems. I don't have to think about how I want to do it, how you want to do it, how John or Travis want to do it. It gets done the same way every single time. And then the other part of it, so it helps us standardize the data that we're collecting and the information that we're doing and the configuration of the environment. And we use those monitors to make sure that configuration is staying within the standard that we want to achieve, whatever that standard might be. And then the change audits and alerts are probably one of the key pieces because, again, documentation doesn't, it's a living and breathing kind of thing, right? It doesn't end after the first time you write it down. And that's where we said earlier, data has a very short shelf life. So making sure that we're tracking and looking through the changes that are happening and auditing those systems on a daily basis allows us to keep this information in that central repository, like as IT Glue is, to make sure that it's always up to date, it's always the latest and greatest, and that if anything changes, like that RDP open to the server so I can work on it at home, or we created an admin account because we're going to do some testing and then we forgot about it, or we let that guy go and I don't know what he did before he left and he had access to everything. Did he do something nefarious? Did he give himself access somewhere? So those audits are absolutely critical. And then documenting is, one of the most important things we need to be doing. That probably is the thing that sort of gets pushed off to the back burner a lot of the times.
Right. And totally, especially as we've been all kind of firefighting right now over the past few months, deploying all these cloud solutions, ordering laptops for everyone. We probably might have forgot about some things we might have done in the heat of the moment just to get things done, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just need to remember that. So we wanted to take some time here to show you kind of about what Liongard actually looks like.
Yeah, so basically what you're looking at is what we call an inspector. So we have a customer environment, which basically maps over to an IT Glue organization. And then in that environment, we have a host of what we call inspections. This is generally an agent-based solution. So there's agents that are up in the cloud, agents on an agent on premises, and then they grab information from those systems and start to shuttle that data back into Liongard, which then automatically rolls it over and updates all of this information into IT Glue. One of the key things to take away, I think, from this screenshot is the timeline. So across the top of your screen where you see the little number 1 and the little caret right there, that is the timeline. Every little dot on that timeline is an audit, a complete audit. It's a full system audit of whatever service or environment we're looking at. Could be a customer's internet domain, it could be their SQL server, it could be a virtual environment, it could be their firewall, could be a Windows server or a Linux box. Doesn't really matter. We're gathering that information, auditing every day, and storing that audit historically. And to give you an idea of what kind of comes in with that audit, like this one happens to be an Office 365 inspection, but is all of that data that you were looking at. And so that data, all of that information, way more than you guys would ever try to write down or copy and paste, all of that data goes to IT Glue every single time. So every little dot on the timeline is a new revision in IT Glue. So it'll automatically update that data. And this, I think, highlights, overall at a high level, what what Liongard's really doing, right? It's gathering that system and data information and managing those changes, right? So did somebody get elevated privileges? Did we add a new admin account somewhere? Did a new SQL user show up? Did somebody add some licenses to Office 365? And how do we get that from the guy that added the licenses back over to the finance person who actually has to make sure it gets on the agreement or on the contract? So that change, those alerts that we can generate are focused really on two core things. Did we change something? And tracking those changes in the step before it, right? Did we change something you need to know about, right? 3389 is open on the firewall, 5 licenses added to the portal, 3 new users added to this company, things like that. Or, we just opened up, a new admin account, or we created a new service account, or we did an update to a server or something like that. And those might be things you need to know about. And then, is this environment secure? So like, do you guys have MFA turned on all of your Office users? Do you have SPF and DMARC done on all your domains? And if you don't know, how long would it take you to find out? So try to think about that for a little bit and go, if I had to go look at every single domain right now, figure out what the SPF and DMARC records are, how long would that actually take me? Or if I had to review the protocols supported for every SSL certificate, how long would that take, especially if you didn't write it down? So those are the kind of
Yeah,
things that, automation can really help with.
totally. That's really what, our two tools coming together are really supposed to do, is to help, integrate these two solutions so that it is secure and updated. So we kind of touched on this, but just a bit of graphical uh, indication here is that, Liongard uses the IT Glue API to push that data in there so that we can handle the repository and the of that information, and then also your templates that you already have used for your other manual things. Because unfortunately, at this point, we can't automate everything. There still is checks and balances you're going to need to do. So we're still going to keep those right inside of IT Glue as well.
Yep. Yeah, there's still a lot of stuff you can't. Like, what's the door code to the bathroom?
Yeah,
Does anybody know
totally.
what time do you guys open? When do you close? Who do I contact? What vendor information do you guys have?
Yeah. So I wanted to show you a quick video of what this looks like when it comes into IT Glue. So you can see here that there is different tables, very similar to what it looked like in the last screenshot. And then because they are pushing revisions in, you can also add in, see the revisions here. I'll play this video again, just so you can see. But we have that info and it's all searchable inside of IT Glue. So the tool that you're already used to working in today, you're going to have this updated info from those different inspectors. So, maybe you have, you don't want to document all that AWS info or information from Cisco Meraki. So you have an inspector set up in Liongard and you can push that into IT Glue.
And then you have some folks who they'll go, you know what, I'll just develop it. I'll just make my own, right? And that, I mean, every time is precious, right? If you think about it, at the end of the day, for an MSP, and I've been working in the MSP community now for the past 11 years. I spent 10 years at ConnectWise. Don't hold that against me, guys. But the idea is that automation can really help us to get a lot more efficient at what we're essentially trying to accomplish, and being able to kind of pull this information together and add it into the system is really it's too inefficient to do it any other way. It just takes way too long, right? Nobody wants to spend the next 6 hours writing it. Time is your most precious commodity, and it's the thing that you probably have to protect and be the most scrupulous with, because you only have so much of it. You only have so much time, talent, and treasure to work with, and you need to maximize that in the most effective way possible. And I've kind of been working with MSPs for the past decade, helping them understand, how do I get the most out of this finite box of time that I have to work with.
Totally. And I think that just comes down to trying to be as efficient, like you as possible here. And so there's just really 3 steps that I think that all we talked about today comes down to. So what do you document? We have the practices here in IT Glue, and then in Liongard, you guys have the different inspectors that are going to help do that. And that kind of leads into the how aspect of it, right? How you're going to save that time and do it in an automated way.
Mm-hmm.
And then where you do it is in IT Glue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they and that's where a lot of these templates between, what we set up as inspections and the templates that are within IT Glue, that is really where the what comes in, like trying to define what that's supposed to look like. If you have none of this in place, for example, who decides what should you be doing and how much of it you should be doing and how much of it should we be collecting? And well, everybody just goes, okay, well, what do you want me to write down? And then somebody goes, everything. Like, well, that'll take me forever. So let's try to write down and document everything and not take forever.
Totally. Yeah, so I think that the kind of the lessons that we've discussed today is that documentation is a really key foundation to any security practice that you're doing. And a lot of them, I remember a few years ago when I was starting to look into this, and I was getting all kind of worried about, Nist and CIS, and we have our own versions in Canada here that I was like, okay, what does this all mean? And but it really just kind of came down to understanding that they all have a very similar foundations and principles. They all have that, kind of different control areas that are all very similar. It's not like all these different wheels that it's a wheel. It's really security. And so it's all the same, just different ways of slicing and dicing it, and whichever one you want to pull against. So
You won't go wrong with any of them, that's for sure.
totally, that's for sure. That I do want to give a quick plug here as we wrap up here, that we do know that especially when you're trying to sell security services, that sometimes your customers may not understand why that's important. And so selling a new firewall or a new security service that might help you become more compliant with that, or a new project to do that, is sometimes tough, especially in these economic times. So join us tomorrow, actually, at 9 a.m. Pacific or 12 Eastern, where my boss here, Nadir, he's our general manager at IT Glue, is going to be joined by Eric Simpson, and they're going to be talking about how you can sell to existing customers using a technology roadmap. And a lot of things that are going to be on that technology roadmap are security related. So this is a great one to take out as well. So head over to the link that we've just posted in the chat there for you to sign up for that webinar as well. If you can't make those times, if you're over in the UK as well, I know that's around dinner time for you, sign up as well, and we'll send out the recording for it, just like we're going to do for today's session as well. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the Liongard solution, you can head over. They have some info here. Bill can obviously get in touch with you and help you out with that.
Yeah, definitely. Just you can go to liongard.com/demo. You can peruse the site, obviously, check us out. There's tons of case studies and information about what we do, how we help, the areas that we feel we can help you with. And, we'd love to, if you need more information, we'd love to chat more with you.
Totally. And if you want to know a little bit more about security and working inside of IT Glue, you can head into our website at itglue.com/stronger-security. Those links are also in the chat window as well. All right, we do have some time. We're going to quickly answer a few questions that have come through. So David actually has two questions here. His first question, I'll ask to you, Bill. He wants to know whether Liongard imports into new flexible assets, or it's going to use their existing flexible assets in IT Glue.
So fundamentally, no, it's going to put in new flexible assets. And there's a couple of good reasons for that. One is our data set looks different, right? Think square peg, round hole. When you create a flexible asset, right, you put your own tables and fields and things like that in it. That doesn't match our data set. We don't have a place to put our information in that flexible asset. So if you think of it from a data structure standpoint, it's not really possible to do that. Same thing with the configurations in IT Glue is that there's a certain set of tables and things like that, also API access. So the data sets don't match. I've got this many fields on the one side and I have this many fields I'm trying to put into it. And obviously that doesn't work. So we create new flexible assets. We label those flexible assets as auto, so you can separate what's being auto-generated versus what you guys have already created. And there's a couple of things that IT Glue's done to help us sort of manage this process too. Is one, you can create flexible asset groups in there. So you can organize my assets that I'm manually keeping and the assets that I want to automatically update. So I know which ones are being which. And they've put in a nice quick tagging feature and a related items feature as well, where I can actually tag other assets. So like I may have some stuff that I typed up or wrote down about an asset. And then I've got the rest of the information Liongard provided, and you can easily just link those two together so that they talk to each other.
Awesome. Yeah, related items, that's the glue in IT glue. We love them. And
That's the whole point of it. Yeah.
exactly. David also asks if the timeline in Liongard shows who made the change that caused the difference between the different snapshots.
Yeah. So real quick, without being terribly technical, there's two ways of doing audits, right? You have a SIEM style audit, which is sort of a log aggregator, a la Splunk or something like that, or some other SIEM tools that do log aggregation. The logs have different sets of data and information, right? The way that Liongard does the change tracking is first it uses a foundational piece called a metric. Anybody that's built any report knows a metric is just a data point. So I've got, 1,000 Active Directory data points. What I care about is 100 of those. And so we take those metrics, and when I do an audit today and then an audit tomorrow, I compare those 100, 200, whatever they are. I compare those things together to see if any of those data points changed from the one audit to the next audit. And so in that information we're not actually using the native logging capability of a particular platform or solution, because some platforms and solutions don't have them. And so this is the only way to track changes, is looking at literally a complete audit one day, a complete audit the next day, and go, okay, well, that's the thing that changed. So I'm going to document this one thing right here. So right now, no, it doesn't say who did it, but it's not, for the most part, it's not a far leap to get to the whodunit, right? So, usually the first questions asked, and I've asked this many years over my career, is what did you do? When did you do it? What was it before you changed it? Those are the most important things. And then if it's an issue of like behavior correction or training or something like that, that's usually when we need to go to the whodunit, right? Or security breach in that case. But usually it's what'd you do, when'd you do it, what was it before you changed it, because now I got to go fix it. And then if it's a training education or security potential, then the whodunit comes in. Otherwise, the whodunit that may not matter. It's just what did you do, and I need to fix that. So the whodunit, though, is not a far reach to get to. There's a lot of documentation that we're gathering, like if it's a Windows domain in Active Directory, you can just rewind time in Active Directory, go back to that day, and look at which admin account logged in. That's whodunit. Or just now that I know what you did and when you did it, and I know what was changed, I can narrow my search in a log file just to go find the user who logged in at that time. So it's not far a stretch to get to the whodunit. Usually the first things you want to know is like what, when, and what was it before.
Right. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your insights today with us. I was very glad that we can continue this series with you. Bill, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving for those of you in the US next week.
Thanks for having us, Travis. We really, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure today. So, and you guys have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.